nightmares with the kind of darkness that waits for the lights to go out. These accounts are inspired by real paranormal legends that have tormented people for centuries. Terrors that will make you question every shadow in your room. Tonight, we're exploring 3 legends so terrifying they might just haunt your dreams. Section 1. The Demon on Your Chest. The wall between our world and the world of nightmares. It's supposed to be absolute, unbreakable. It's there to separate the horrors in our heads from the safety of our beds. But what happens when that wall crumbles? What happens when you wake up, but the nightmare keeps going? This is a story about sleep paralysis, that terrifying state where your mind is wide awake, but your body is still locked in sleep. For our first account, we head to a small college dorm room where a student named Maya learned that some nightmares can follow you right into the waking world. Maya was a sophomore, buried under the usual mountain of midterms and deadlines. Sleep wasn't a comfort. It was a luxury, snatched in frantic 3-hour bursts between study sessions. Anxiety was a constant hum in her chest. One night, after finally wrestling a paper into submission, she collapsed onto her bed without even changing her clothes. She was pulled down into a deep, dreamless sleep. She wasn't sure how long she'd been out when she woke up. It wasn't a gentle stirring. It was a sudden, violent snap into consciousness. Her eyes were open. She saw the familiar shapes of her dorm room, the orange glow of a street lamp slicing through the blinds, the silhouette of her roommate's desk buried in textbooks. She heard the low hum of the mini fridge. Her mind was awake, and it was screaming because she couldn't move. It was like being cast in concrete. Her arms and legs felt like lead. She tried to lift a hand, wiggle a finger, anything, but her body ignored every command. A cold, sharp terror cut through the fog of sleep. She tried to yell for her roommate, who was sleeping just a few feet away, but her jaw was wired shut. The only sound she could make was a pathetic whimper that died in her throat. That's when she felt it, a pressure. It started at her feet, a subtle weight, like a heavy blanket, but then it moved. The pressure crept slowly up her legs, over her hips, and settled hard onto her chest. It was immense, a crushing, suffocating force that turned every breath into a desperate fight. It felt, as she'd later describe, like a tombstone was being lowered onto her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the terrifying silence. Straining her eyes, she tried to see what was holding her down. And then, a shape began to pull itself from the shadows. It was a figure, darker than the dark, a void in the shape of a person perched on the edge of her bed. As her eyes adjusted, details started to bleed through the fizz blackness. It was humanoid, but twisted and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs folded into its body. It had no face, just a smooth, featureless expanse of shadow. The pressure on her chest got worse, and a low, guttural growl vibrated through her body. The thing was sitting on her, and then it leaned forward. The formless shadow lowered itself until it was right over her face. 2 faint, red pinpricks of light ignited where its eyes should be. They glowed with a sick intelligence, boring right into her, seeing the terror she couldn't show. She felt a cold, foul breath on her cheek that smelled like turned earth and decay. She was pinned, helpless, staring into the eyes of a creature pulled from the oldest human fears. The paralysis, the weight, the shadow. It's the classic calling card of the creature, known in cultures all over the world, from the old hag in Newfoundland to the ancient mare of Germanic folklore. The original nightmare. The moment lasted an eternity, just as she felt herself starting to black out. The weight vanished. With a violent gasp, Maya broke free, lurching upright in a cold sweat. She frantically slammed on her bedside lamp, flooding the room with light. Nothing. Her roommate was still asleep. The room was exactly as it was supposed to be. But the encounter left a permanent scar. Sleep was no longer a refuge. It was a doorway. And now she knew, with absolute certainty, that something was on the other side, just waiting to be let in. Being trapped in your own body is one thing, but what happens when the horror isn't just a vision? What happens when it can reach out and touch you, leaving marks you can't explain? If these stories are sending a chill down your spine, you should consider subscribing. We explore the darkest corners of the unknown every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Section 2: The Unseen Attackers. There's a big difference between a nightmare and a night terror. A person having a night terror might suddenly shoot bolt upright, scream, and thrash violently, their eyes wide with a fear that sees things the rest of us can't. But when they wake up, they remember nothing. For most, it's just a forgotten blip of panic in the night. For some, however, the terror leaves behind physical proof. Our next story comes from a family in Ohio who found out their young son was being tormented at night by something that left more than just bad memories. It started when Leo was 6. His parents, David and Sarah, were jolted awake one night by a blood-curdling scream from his room. They ran down the hall to find Leo sitting straight up in bed. His eyes were wide open but glazed over, staring at an empty corner of the room. He was shrieking, a raw, terrified sound, and kicking his legs as if he were fighting someone off. David reached him first, grabbing his small shoulders. Leo, wake up. It's just a dream. But Leo didn't seem to hear him. He kept screaming, mixing unintelligible words with pleas of, "Get off me, stop it." When Sarah flipped on the light, the boy's terror only seemed to get worse. He thrashed in his father's arms for another minute before, just as suddenly as it started, he stopped. His body went limp, his eyes closed, and he fell back onto his pillow, instantly asleep. He was completely peaceful. David and Sarah stood there, hearts pounding, and checked the room, the closets, under the bed. Nothing. They wrote it off as a really bad nightmare. But then it happened again, and again the next week. The pattern was always the same. The screams, the thrashing, the vacant, terrified stare, and then a sudden return to sleep with zero memory of it in the morning. When they'd ask, Leo would just shake his head, confused, and say he slept great. That changed one Tuesday morning. After another violent episode the night before, Sarah was helping Leo get dressed. As she pulled his t-shirt over his head, she gasped. Raked across his back, from shoulder blade to waist, were 3 long parallel scratches. They were thin and red, like angry cat scratches, but the family didn't own a cat. "Leo, honey, what happened to your back?" she asked, her voice trembling. Leo twisted, trying to see. "I don't know, Mommy. It doesn't hurt." Sarah looked closer. The marks were too precise, too uniform for him to have done it to himself. She remembered his screams from the night before, his frantic pleas. A cold dread settled deep in her stomach. Over the next month, it got worse. The terrors became more frequent, and more often than not, they were followed by new, inexplicable marks. Sometimes it was scratches, almost always in sets of 3, on his legs, arms, or even his face. One morning, they found a small, circular bruise on his forearm that looked terrifyingly like a bite mark. You can find thousands of similar stories all over the world, with people reporting these strange injuries, convinced they're the work something unseen and malevolent. Many believe these aren't sleep disorders at all, but nocturnal demonic attacks designed to torment and instill fear. David and Sarah weren't religious people, but they were getting desperate. A sleep specialist confirmed Leo was having night terrors, but had no medical explanation for the injuries, suggesting he was doing it to himself, but couldn't explain how a 6-year-old could leave 3 perfect scratches down the middle of his own back. Terrified, Sarah went online and fell down a rabbit hole of paranormal forums and stories about what some called spiritual warfare. People described the exact same thing: children having violent night terrors and waking up with marks, along with a feeling of a hostile presence in the house. The solutions they offered seemed crazy: prayers, cleansing rituals. But David and Sarah were at their wits' end. Seeing those marks on their son's skin every day was its own kind of torture. Whatever was happening, it was real enough to leave scars. The idea that something invisible was visiting their son's room each night, hurting him in a way he couldn't even remember, was a horror beyond any nightmare. This wasn't just a sleep disorder anymore. They were fighting an unseen attacker, a nightly visitor who left its calling card etched into their little boy's skin. Section 3. The Spider in the Shadows. Some of the scariest things we experience happen in that gray area between worlds. Hypnagogic hallucinations occur in the twilight state, right as you're falling asleep or waking up, causing vivid visions that feel undeniably real. People report seeing everything from shadow figures to giant insects. Our final story is about a man named Kevin, whose brief encounter in this state left him with a lifelong fear of what's hiding in the dark. Kevin was a rational man, an architect in his late 30s. He believed in blueprints and physics, in things you could measure. The paranormal to him was just a product of an overactive imagination. That all changed one autumn evening. He'd been working late and went to bed exhausted, falling asleep the second his head hit the pillow. He woke with a jolt, not from a sound, but from a feeling. The unnerving feeling of being watched. The room was dark, but moonlight cut a silver line across the far wall. He was on his side, facing the bedroom door. He felt groggy, his mind still half stuck in a dream, but his eyes were open, and in the deepest, darkest corner of the room, he saw it. It was a figure, a tall, impossibly thin silhouette of a man, blacker than the shadows around it. It wasn't just blocking the light, it seemed to be eating it, a pocket of pure void. The shape was vaguely human, but unnaturally long, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. It was perfectly still, just standing there. Kevin's heart started to pound. He told himself it was just a trick of the light, his coat on a chair, his eyes playing tricks on him. He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy and slow, like he was moving through water. He blinked hard, trying to clear his vision, praying the figure would resolve into a familiar shape. It didn't. Instead, it moved. It didn't walk. It seemed to unfurl. The solid black mass began to twist, its limbs extending in a grotesque, unnatural way. It was like watching a time-lapse of a plant growing, except this was a thing of pure nightmare. The long, shadowy torso bent forward, and from its back, more long, spindly appendages began to emerge, jointed and sharp. Kevin's brain just couldn't process it. The Shadow Man was transforming, or maybe it was releasing what it really was. The shape was no longer human. It was low to the ground, its body a dense, dark orb with multiple limbs branching out. It took him a second to recognize the shape, and when he did, a wave of pure revulsion washed over him. It was a spider. A gigantic, monstrous spider, the size of a large dog, made of living shadow. He was frozen, not by paralysis, but by sheer, absolute horror. The spider took a step, its shadowy leg moving with a silent, fluid motion. Then another. It was coming toward him. He thought he could hear a faint, dry, clicking sound. Finally, finding his voice, he let out a strangled croak that was supposed to be a scream. He scrambled backward, his hands fumbling desperately for the lamp on his nightstand. His fingers hit the switch, and the room was blasted with light. He blinked against the brightness, his eyes darting to the corner. Nothing, just a laundry basket against the wall. The spider, the shadow figure, gone. He sat there for a long time, panting, his body trembling. On a rational level, he knew it was a hypnopompic hallucination. The science was clear. His brain was still dreaming, projecting an image onto his waking world. But the explanation did nothing to quiet the terror. It felt too real. The way the figure had unfurled, the silent, deliberate steps of the spider. It was burned into his memory. From that night on, Kevin could never sleep in a completely dark room. The architect, who believed only in what was solid and measurable, now had a deep respect for the power of shadows. He understood that even if the monsters aren't real, the terror most certainly is. From the crushing weight on your chest to the scratches left by an unseen attacker, the night holds terrors we can't always explain. Science offers reasons, glitches in our sleep cycle, tricks of the brain, but for anyone who's been there, the feeling of a malevolent presence is impossible to shake. So the next time you're alone in the dark, and you see a flicker of movement in the corner of your eye, remember these stories and wonder what might be watching from just out of sight. What about you? Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain in the dead of night? Share your stories in the comments below. We read every single one. And for more tales that will haunt your dreams, subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what we have coming for you.